Good evening, guys. I'm going to give you some notes for even and odd identities. And these are pretty easy. They're pretty easy to identify. Not too much. You're still going to be using the Pythagorean identities and the reciprocal and quotient identities that we've been using for the past 2 days. So I'm going to give you the even and odd ones here as they're displayed on your screen there. And then I'm going to give you one example just to show you how they work. And then tomorrow in class we'll practice more of these in addition to continuing to practice our other problems. And so if you're having some questions or you have some issues, and especially in some of the problems that you had tonight for homework, because some of those are really tough, just bring those to class tomorrow and we'll be happy to go over them. Tomorrow you do have a daily check on your identities, so you need to make sure that you know your reciprocal, quotient, and Pythagorean identities. And then I'm going to give you a couple of just the basic verifying problems that we've been doing on the worksheets. So even and odd functions, the even functions, the two even functions are cosine and secant. Notice that it is the reciprocal. Cosine and secant are reciprocals of one another. Basically what an even function says is this: if you have cosine of a negative angle, so negative x in this case, or the secant, what happens is, since it's an even function, that turns out just to be a positive angle. So cosine of negative x just turns out to be cosine of x, and secant of negative x is secant of x. So basically the negative just goes away. One way I like to think about it is, when you square a number, and 2 is an even number, so like when you take negative 2 and you square it, you get positive 4. So what happens here when you have a negative angle, since these are even functions, they turn out to be positives. And with our odds, the rest of the trig functions are odd: sine, cosecant, tangent, cotangent. So what happens here when you have those with a negative angle, the negative actually comes out in front. And again, I kind of think about it in terms of exponents. If you take a negative number and you raise it to the third power, and 3 being an odd number, then you end up with a negative answer. So that's your even and odd identities right there. You will need to know those for your test as well. So let me give you an example here. And by the way, these will not be on your daily check as far as knowing the identities. It'll just be the Pythagorean quotient and reciprocal identities. So let's take a look at an example here of verifying, where we've thrown in some negatives with our problem. Okay, so we've got secant of negative x over cosecant of negative x equals negative tangent of x. So I'm going to deal with the left side. I'm going to leave the right side alone. But what I want to do is get rid of these negatives to start with. So secant of negative x. Now secant is an even function. What's up here is our even function. And it says that the secant of negative x can be rewritten as just the secant of x. So I'm going to rewrite this as the secant of x over, and then the cosecant of negative x, and cosecant is an odd function, so I'm going to rewrite that as negative cosecant, so the negative comes out in front. And then the rest of the problem just stays the same here. So see, now what I did is I got rid of those negatives, negative angle measures, and now it's just like the problems we've been working for the first 2 days here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in terms of sine and cosine. So I'm going to take secant, and I'm going to rewrite that as 1 over the cosine of x, and then I'm going to take the negative cosecant, and I'm going to leave the negative there, and I'm going to write that as 1 over the sine of x. Okay? And now when I do this, I'm going to do keep, change, flip. So I'm going to leave the numerator, so 1 over the cosine of x. I'm going to change it to multiplication, and I'm going to flip this denominator. Now when I flip it, it's still negative. That didn't change. Still have a negative fraction here. But it becomes sine of x over 1. And that equals negative tangent of x. And now I can't cancel anything because there's nothing in common here. So I'm just going to multiply straight across. So 1 times negative sine of x gives me negative sine of x. And here cosine of x times 1 gives me the cosine of x. That equals negative tan of x. And sine over cosine turns out to be the tangent. And I still have the negative there. So negative tan of x equals negative tan of x. And I just verified it. Okay? So what's going to happen in these problems is you're going to have negatives to start with, but you're going to get rid of those negatives by using your even and odd identities, and then it becomes just like the problems you've been working in the first 2 days. So we'll see you guys in class tomorrow, and please circle any ones that you have questions on so that we can get those cleared up.